Welcome to the Undead Sages podcast, where we travel back in time to talk to long-dead wise men and women. Of special interest is the question how sensitive people like you and me can live rich and meaningful lives in our uncertain times. My name is Merijn de Haen, and today we'll be talking to the Buddha as he is portrayed in the Pali Canon. Siddhartha Gautama was a man who was born a prince in the 6th century BCE. Legend has it that he grew weary of palace life and left his wife, son, and destiny as a future ruler to find the answer to the age-old question of human suffering. After 6 years of relentless searching, he reached awakening and decided to teach his method to anyone who would listen. His 45-year teaching career involved long wanderings across what is now northern India, punctuated by yearly retreats in monsoon season, which is where we meet him today. Dear Buddha, thank you for agreeing to speak with me once again.
Yeah, can we cut this short? I have raindrops to catch. Just kidding, Merijn. I am glad to be here for our discussion, which was valuable to me as well last time.
Okay. Well then, last time we spoke, we went straight into your teachings. I think that was only proper, because understanding them is really key to understanding the impact you've made on the world. As you know, I have traveled from a time and place quite distant from yours. I come from half a world away and 2,500 years into the future. And yet, in my time, people from across the globe know about you. In fact, you've started a movement that continues to have more adherents in my time than are even alive in yours. Many more, in fact, about 3 to 4 times as many.
That's very interesting.
So today, to round out my understanding of the background to your teachings, could you tell us about the philosophical landscape that your Dhamma developed in?
It is a time of great intellectual and spiritual activity. Northern India is alive with questions about life, death, and the nature of existence. The Vedic tradition dominates with its rituals and sacrifices meant to maintain cosmic order. The Brahmins, the priestly class, perform these rituals, claiming the authority to mediate between humans and the divine. But alongside this, other voices rise. Wanderers and ascetics, people who leave their homes in search of truth, are challenging the authority of the Brahmins. They reject rituals and ask deeper questions. What is the source of suffering? How can one be free from it? This is the world I am born into, a world rich with debate, yet restless with unanswered questions.
I'm guessing these spiritual movements influenced you?
Yes, they did. The Shramana movements, wandering ascetics, reject the rigid caste system and the Vedic obsession with rituals. They look inward for answers. Some practice extreme austerities, believing that punishing the body can free the soul. Others focus on meditation, seeking deep states of absorption. As a young man, I leave my home and join these wanderers. I learn from great teachers who show me how to enter profound states of concentration. But even in the depths of these meditative experiences, I see that suffering persists. These teachings are powerful, but they do not go far enough. I realize I must find my own way.
What ideas are shaping your understanding at this time?
The ideas of karma and rebirth are central. Most people accept that actions, karma, have consequences, shaping not only this life, but also future lives. Life is seen as a cycle, a continuous round of birth, death, and rebirth called samsara. For many, this cycle is inescapable, a fact of existence. But the ascetics I meet aim to break free from this cycle entirely. They call this liberation. Some seek it through renunciation, others through extreme discipline. I take these ideas seriously, but I want to understand the mechanics of it. What keeps the cycle turning, and how can it truly end?
How do you innovate upon these ideas?
I come to see that the key is not in punishing the body or chasing blissful states of meditation. Both extremes miss the mark. Instead, I discover what I call the middle way. Neither indulgence nor self mortification, but a path of balance. I also develop a new understanding of karma and rebirth. It is not some eternal soul being reborn, but a process, a chain of causes and conditions. Suffering arises because of ignorance and craving, and these forces drive the cycle of becoming. When ignorance is uprooted, the cycle collapses. This is liberation, not as an escape, but as the cessation of suffering at its root.
How does your approach differ from the other movements?
First, my path is universal. It is not for one caste or class. Anyone, man, woman, rich, poor, can walk this path. Second, I reject the idea that rituals or austerities are necessary for liberation. Freedom comes from understanding, not from ceremony or self denial. Finally, I teach that there is no permanent self. This is a radical departure. Many believe in an eternal soul that must be purified or united with the divine. But I see that clinging to the idea of a self is the root of suffering. When you let go of this illusion, you find peace.
So, should we also understand your emphasis on impermanence and not self as critiques of the cultural and philosophical doctrines of your time?
They are both critiques and new directions. I deeply engage with the ideas and questions of my time, but I do not merely negate them. Instead, I seek to offer a deeper and more direct understanding of reality, one that leads to liberation from suffering. The teachings on impermanence and not self challenge many prevailing ideas, especially the focus on an eternal self and unity with a divine reality. These doctrines claim that a permanent essence exists within each being, but I see no evidence for this in my direct observation.
Why do you challenge the idea of an eternal self?
The idea of a permanent self creates attachment. When people believe in a self, whether physical, mental, or spiritual, they cling to it. They desire to protect it, enhance it, or perpetuate it. This clinging gives rise to craving, aversion, and suffering. In deep meditation, I observe that all things arise and pass away. The body changes, feelings change, thoughts and perceptions change, even consciousness arises and fades moment by moment. There is nothing stable or unchanging to hold on to. What we call self is a process, a collection of ever-changing phenomena. By teaching not self, I'm not denying that people have thoughts, feelings, or experiences. Rather, I'm pointing out that these are not permanent or independent. I may have thoughts, feelings, and experiences, but with strong mindfulness, I realize that I am not those thoughts. This subtle change in attribution matters quite a lot, as it undermines the processes of I-making. In normal life, we gradually get used to the idea, this is my body, this is my mind, etc. But when this is seen to be an illusion, we can let go of it. Letting go of the illusion of self frees the mind from clinging and opens the door to liberation.
And what about impermanence? Was that also a critique of your time's doctrines?
Yes, it is a critique, but more importantly, it is a fundamental truth. Impermanence is not just an abstract concept. It is something everyone can observe. Everything changes. Our bodies, relationships, possessions, and even our ideas. Nothing remains fixed or permanent. Some philosophies in my time claim that beneath the changing world lies an unchanging reality, whether it is the Atman, the Self, or Brahman. But when I look deeply, I do not find such permanence. Clinging to the idea of something eternal creates suffering because it conflicts with the truth of change. By teaching impermanence, I encourage people to see the world as it is. When you understand impermanence, you stop clinging to things as though they will last forever. This understanding brings freedom and peace.
So your teachings go beyond negating these doctrines. They offer something new?
Precisely. My teachings are not merely rejections. They are an invitation to see reality clearly. I do not speculate about eternal realities or metaphysical truths. Instead, I guide people to observe their own experience directly. When you observe impermanence, you stop clinging to what cannot last. When you see there is no permanent self, you let go of craving and aversion tied to protecting or enhancing that illusion. These insights are not intellectual arguments. They are transformative realizations that lead to the end of suffering.
I imagine that this challenged the cultural and religious authority of your time.
Yes, it did. The Brahmins claimed authority based on the Vedas and their rituals. They emphasized the eternal self, caste duties, and the power of sacrifice to maintain cosmic order. By teaching impermanence and not self, I challenged these foundations. As I said, I also rejected the idea that liberation depends on caste, ritual, or divine favor. Liberation comes from understanding the nature of suffering and letting go of its causes. This teaching is open to everyone, regardless of their status or background. It is not tied to dogma or tradition, but to direct experience and wisdom.
Your Dhamma seems to be hyper focused on the individual, on their personal suffering, their karma, and their liberation. Yet you also established the Sangha, a community of practitioners. How do you reconcile this emphasis on the individual with the communal nature of the Sangha?
The Dhamma is indeed focused on the transformation of the individual because suffering arises within the mind. Liberation cannot be given or imposed by another. It must come through one's own insight and effort. However, this individual journey is greatly supported by community. The Sangha provides guidance, encouragement, and shared purpose. It is a refuge where practitioners help one another stay on the path. While the work of liberation is personal, the Sangha fosters the conditions that make this work possible. In the Sangha, individuals are not alone in their efforts. They walk the path together, learning from and inspiring one another.
So the Sangha is a support system, but not essential to the path?
It is not essential in an absolute sense. A self-awakened Buddha, for instance, finds the path without the guidance of others. But for most people, the Sangha is invaluable. It provides access to the teachings, opportunities for shared practice, and the wisdom of those who have progressed further on the path. Living among others who embody the Dhamma strengthens one's resolve and deepens understanding. The Sangha also allows practitioners to cultivate qualities like generosity, patience, and compassion, which are essential for liberation.
How do you address the tension between individual and collective responsibility in the Sangha?
The Sangha balances these responsibilities. Each member is responsible for their own progress, but they are also accountable to the community. They act in ways that support harmony and respect the well-being of others. The rules I established for monastics, for example, are not just about personal discipline. They also maintain the integrity and cohesion of the Sangha. The Sangha serves as a microcosm of interconnectedness. When one member cultivates wisdom and kindness, it benefits the whole. When the Sangha thrives, it provides refuge and inspiration to others, creating a ripple effect that extends beyond the community.
You've spoken of the Sangha as one of the three jewels. Can you describe these three jewels and how they fit together?
The three jewels, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, are the heart of the path. They are refuges, providing guidance and support for those seeking liberation. The Buddha is the first jewel, representing the one who discovers and teaches the path to liberation. It is not just my person, but the awakened mind itself. The realization that suffering can end and the wisdom that makes this possible. The Dhamma is the second jewel, the truth of the teachings. It is the way things are, the laws of nature, the path to liberation, and the practical steps for ending suffering. The Dhamma is the guide, showing the way to freedom. The third jewel is the community of practitioners who embody the Dhamma. It includes those who have fully awakened and those who are still walking the path. The Sangha supports, protects, and transmits the teachings. Together, these jewels form a complete refuge. The Buddha points the way, the Dhamma provides the method, and the Sangha offers the communal strength to stay on the path. They are interconnected, each reinforcing the other.
So the three jewels address both the individual and the collective?
Precisely. The individual relies on the three jewels for guidance and support, while the collective Sangha depends on the strength of individuals who practice sincerely. The three jewels remind us that liberation, though personal, is not isolated. It is part of a greater web of wisdom, truth, and compassion that benefits all beings. Through the three jewels, the path to liberation is both deeply individual and profoundly connected to the well-being of others. They are not in tension but in harmony, reflecting the truth of interdependence.
In my time, philosophy is mainly used to address collective problems, such as how to live together in the absence of a deity who imposes order. To what extent was your Dhamma meant to be applied to larger scale human systems, like collectives, families, trade associations, or governments?
The Dhamma is universal, and while its primary focus is on transforming the individual mind, its principles naturally extend to larger scale systems. Every collective, whether a family, a trade association, or a government, is made up of individuals. When individuals act with wisdom, compassion, and integrity, their relationships and organizations reflect these qualities. I did not design the Dhamma as a blueprint for social systems, but its values, ethical conduct, mindfulness, and interdependence can be applied to create harmony and reduce suffering in any group or institution.
How do the principles of the Dhamma translate to these larger systems?
The Dhamma emphasizes interconnectedness. No being exists in isolation, and no action is without consequence. This truth applies equally to individuals and groups. For larger systems, the Dhamma offers several guiding principles. Firstly, ethical behavior, such as honesty, nonviolence, and fairness, is the foundation of trust and cooperation in any group. A family thrives when its members act with kindness and respect. A trade association prospers when it conducts business fairly. A government gains legitimacy when it governs justly. Second, compassion ensures that decisions prioritize the well being of all, not just a select few. In families, this means caring for one another selflessly. In governance, it means considering the welfare of the most vulnerable and addressing the causes of their suffering. Then, non attachment to power, wealth, or status prevents greed and corruption. Leaders who are free from personal ambition can act in the best interests of their people. Fourth, mindfulness brings clarity and presence to decision making. Whether resolving a family conflict or crafting public policy, mindful attention helps avoid impulsive reactions and allows wise, deliberate choices. And finally, harmony. The Sangha serves as a model for collective life. It operates on mutual respect, shared purpose, and ethical guidelines. Families, organizations, and governments can emulate these qualities to foster cooperation and unity.
Did you explicitly teach how the Dhamma should be applied to governance?
I did not design a system of governance, but I offered guidance to rulers on how to lead with wisdom and compassion. The 10 duties of a king: generosity, morality, self sacrifice, honesty, kindness, self control, non-violence, patience, impartiality, and promoting the welfare of all are examples of how the Dhamma applies to leadership. These principles are not restricted to monarchs. Any group or organization benefits from leaders who embody these qualities. The Dhamma reminds us that leadership is not about dominance, but about service to the greater good.
What about trade and commerce? Did you address these systems directly?
Yes, I spoke about trade and livelihood. Right livelihood is part of the Eightfold Path, and it applies to individuals and communities engaged in commerce. Ethical trade benefits all parties and builds trust. For example, I encouraged fairness in transactions, honesty in business practices, and the avoidance of livelihoods that harm others, such as dealing in weapons, intoxicants, or exploitative industries. Communities that prioritize ethical trade create stability and prosperity while reducing the causes of conflict and suffering.
How does the Dhamma handle conflicts within larger systems?
The Dhamma teaches skillful communication and the resolution of disputes through understanding and compassion. I often encourage dialogue and reconciliation over punitive measures or violence. For example, when I mediated disputes within the Sangha, I emphasized listening, mindfulness, and a commitment to shared values. These same principles can be applied to conflicts in families, trade associations, or governments. When people approach disputes with humility and a willingness to understand the perspectives of others, they create the conditions for harmony.
Could the Dhamma be a foundation for building better societies?
Yes, though society cannot change without the transformation of its individuals. When people cultivate ethical behavior, compassion, and wisdom, they naturally contribute to the well being of their families, communities, and nations. The Dhamma does not impose a specific societal structure, but its principles can guide the creation of systems that prioritize the reduction of suffering and the promotion of peace. Whether it is a family caring for its members, a trade association conducting business fairly, or a government serving its people, the Dhamma offers a timeless framework for harmony and justice.
It's fascinating to see how your teachings, though focused on the individual, naturally extend to the collective.
Remember, the transformation of the whole begins with the transformation of one. By living with wisdom, compassion, and integrity, each person contributes to a world of greater harmony and peace.
You mentioned compassion earlier. We haven't really talked much about your path of the heart yet. Can you elaborate on the heavenly abodes, or Brahma Viharas, their place in your teachings, and their role in attaining Nibbana?
The Brahma Viharas, or the divine abodes, are essential to the path. They represent the qualities of the awakened heart: loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. These are not just lofty ideals, they are practices that transform the mind, uproot defilements, and prepare one for liberation. Loving kindness, metta, is the wish for all beings to be happy and well. Compassion, karuna, is the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. Empathetic joy, mudita, can be practiced by rejoicing in the happiness and success of others. Equanimity, upekha, is evidenced by a balanced and unshaken mind, open to all experiences without preference or aversion.
Are these practices part of the same path as mindfulness and wisdom, or are they a separate discipline?
They are not separate. The Brahma Viharas are integral to the path. They work alongside mindfulness, ethical conduct, and wisdom to purify the mind and guide one toward Nibbana. Practicing the Brahma Viharas helps weaken the defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion. For example, loving kindness counteracts ill will and resentment. Compassion dissolves cruelty and indifference. Empathetic joy overcomes envy and comparison. Equanimity addresses restlessness and clinging. When these qualities are cultivated, the mind becomes lighter, calmer, and more expansive. This creates the conditions for deeper concentration and insight.
Can these qualities alone lead to liberation, or do they need to be combined with other practices?
The Brahma Viharas are powerful, but on their own they do not lead directly to Nibbana. They purify the mind and generate wholesome states, but liberation requires insight into the true nature of reality. For instance, loving kindness and compassion expand the heart and reduce self-centeredness, but they must be combined with wisdom, the understanding of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Only when the mind sees reality clearly can it fully let go of clinging and attain liberation. However, the Brahma Viharas support this process. They create the spaciousness and clarity needed for insight to arise. A mind steeped in kindness and equanimity is naturally more open to seeing the truth.
How do the Brahma Viharas help with the challenges of daily life?
They are invaluable in daily life. These qualities guide how you relate to yourself and others, transforming interactions into opportunities for growth and connection. When you cultivate loving kindness, you meet others with warmth rather than judgment. When compassion arises, you respond to suffering with care rather than avoidance. Empathetic joy helps you celebrate others' successes without envy. Equanimity allows you to face life's ups and downs with balance, rather than being swept away by emotion. By practicing the Brahma Viharas, you reduce conflict and increase harmony in your relationships. You also create an inner stability that protects the mind from being disturbed by external circumstances.
So they're not just practices for meditation, they're a way of living?
Precisely. While the Brahma Viharas can be cultivated in formal meditation, their purpose is to extend into all aspects of life. They are ways of being that align the heart with the truths of interdependence and impermanence. A person who embodies the Brahma Viharas lives with greater freedom and peace. They act with kindness and wisdom, benefiting both themselves and others.
Can you give us an example of how equanimity, in particular, supports liberation?
Equanimity is the culmination of the Brahma Viharas. It is the steady balance of mind that allows you to engage with life without being carried away by attachment or aversion. Imagine facing loss, disappointment, or difficulty. Without equanimity, the mind might react with despair or anger. But with equanimity, you can meet these experiences with clarity and acceptance, knowing they are impermanent and beyond your control. Equanimity also supports insight. When the mind is balanced, it can observe phenomena without distortion. This clarity helps you see the arising and passing of all things, leading to the wisdom that uproots suffering.
It sounds like the Brahma Viharas are both transformative and practical. Would you say they are stepping stones to Nibbana?
Yes, they are stepping stones. They purify the mind and prepare it for deeper practice. By cultivating the Brahma Viharas, you loosen the grip of defilements and create the conditions for insight to arise. But they are more than just steps. They are also expressions of awakening. An awakened being naturally embodies loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. These qualities flow effortlessly from a mind free of greed, hatred, and delusion. The Brahma Viharas are both the path and the fruit of liberation. They remind us that the journey to Nibbana is not just about seeing clearly, it is also about loving deeply and living with balance.
Thank you, Buddha. This conversation has shown just how central the heart is to the path of liberation. For our listeners, if you want to begin cultivating these qualities, try starting with a simple practice of loving kindness. May I be happy, may I be well, may all beings be happy and well. It's a small step that can lead to profound change.
And remember, every step you take on the path benefits not only yourself but all beings. May your practice bring peace and freedom.
And thank you for listening to this conversation with the Buddha from the Pali Canon. The same life all those years ago has sparked many different interpretations of his teachings. The Pali Canon, as we've heard it described today, has been informing the Buddhist cultures of the Southern School of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. There are other schools like the Vajrayana and the Mahayana, and we may have occasion to ask the Buddha back in the future to explain the differences. For now, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Undead Sages podcast, please like the episode, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the podcast.